What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Hobby Hotline, episode 243 here on a Saturday. It is Kentucky Derby Saturday. I know, Logan, before the show, you were showing me a couple cool cards you had there. So I'm going to start off with you, Logan. How are we doing today?
Doing okay. Got this card of Ron Turcotte. He rode Secretariat to the Triple Crown back in 1973. I remember that well. I was just a little kid. So I thought I'd show that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that. Always good to show off the cards whenever there's a sporting event like that. And then we also have Uncle Rich Klein here today. Rich, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. My niece is graduating from law school today, so it's a big day for all of us.
That's always exciting. Congrats to her. That's exciting.
Congrats to her. And unfortunately, I found out too late that they had an invite for me after being told, no, we don't have it. So
oh, geez.
You're stuck with me instead of me going to the ceremony. So depending on what you think, it's either sitting for 3 hours could either be considered a win or seeing her graduate would be a win. Sitting for 3 hours is probably a loss. So
yeah, right.
It's probably a 50-50. So hi, everybody.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The college graduations are always, you're living by the seat of your pants most of the time. Like I graduated college I'm not going to say how many years ago because it's a couple more years than it was than I was expecting to say. But either way, so thank you everybody for coming in. I just want to shout out a couple people in the comments. We got Mark, we got some people coming in. We got Secretariat's favorite athlete of all time. Yeah, such a it's crazy sometimes. I think that they should do like horse signatures. Like, I don't know how they would do that. They cover the paw, or they cover like some sort of thing from the horse, and then they like put it on the card. I think that'd be funny. We got Mad City Brew coming in. Yeah, a hoof card. Yeah, that'd be kind of funny.
Well, there's no doubt that Secretariat would be, from our generation, the most expensive of all those cards.
Yeah, definitely.
And he is moving like a tremendous machine. They're not going to catch him today. If you want to
unfortunately, if you are covering any of the Kentucky Derby news, the favorite apparently was scratched because of either I think it was an injury. They were saying they were having some issues there. So unfortunately, if you're a bettor or you're interested in the Kentucky Derby, unfortunately, the news was that the favorite in the race will not be racing, which I guess maybe is a good thing, because maybe it gives on a different horse maybe more of a chance. But either way, so yeah, do you guys have anything? So we got a couple topics, but I want to make sure do you guys have anything at the top of the show you want to cover before we kind of get into the topics?
Speaking of the Kentucky Derby, more importantly and very sad, several horses have died at that racetrack in the last week. And it's a big thing in the horse racing world. And Bob Baffert is not there this year. He's serving the second of his 2-year suspension.
Yes, that's right.
So there's a lot going on. This race, it generates interest, and it's obviously it's the first Saturday in May. I wonder, and speaking of first Saturday in May, who knew that we'd be the follow-up back to the coronation of King Charles III?
Yeah, that's right. I turned on the TV this morning.
Tops Now and Panini Instant should make cards of that.
Yeah, definitely.
They probably will.
Okay. And let's get some signed cards like Meghan Markle, even though she didn't go.
Yeah, some top.
Yeah, she can describe it. I didn't go.
I didn't go, yes.
And actually, so speaking of autographs, I think that's a perfect segue. So the first topic we have on the agenda today is actually going to be a $420,000 Mickey Mantle autograph that sold. I'm going to pull up the tweet as well, just so we can have a little bit of a visual reference there. Last weekend, there was a Mickey Mantle, a 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle PSA 3, but it had a 10 autograph that sold, and actually was only one of two when it comes to that card having a 10 autograph. And like I said in this tweet, in reference to other PSA 3s, that card sells for around $100,000, but this card obviously sold for $420,000. So I'm interested. I'll start with you, Logan. Like, what are your thoughts overall on kind of autograph cards? And is this maybe could this start like a trend for certain autographs, or do you think it's more specific to like this card, why we're seeing something like this sell?
Well, I'm going to say, starting out, that I think it's more specific to this card in particular, but autograph cards as a whole, I love autograph cards. You know, I've been getting autographs on cards since the 80s. And, but, you know, that was taboo back in those days, as Rich can attest to. You didn't want to destroy a card by getting it autographed, but, you know, that's what we did. And, but now it's done a complete 180. You know, it's completely acceptable. And in fact, it enhances the card now, as you can see with this example.
Right. And so Rich, have you seen throughout your history within sports cards, like have you seen any type of shift away from, or where have you seen the shifts, I guess? Because this is obviously a big card.
Logan is absolutely right. I had a good friend of mine in the 80s and 90s before I moved. In the 80s, before I moved to Texas, Dr. Walt Brown, who also has written books about the Kennedy assassination, but that's a different subject for a different day. He's also one of the leading Kennedy assassination experts in the country. He would go whenever a Mantle or a Mays or a Ted Williams, and he'd always get the card signed, and instead of photos. And the standard operating procedure, as Logan alluded to in the 80s, was that if the autograph was more than the value of the card, you don't get the card signed. If the value, whatever it was, if you have a card like that, you don't get it signed because the value of the card is so much more than the autograph.
Mm-hmm.
As it turned out, because not enough contrarians were out there, you have a lot comparatively of Mantle signed photos, and very few Mantle signed cards, period or not. And that's the biggest change. Mantle passed in 1995, I believe, August 20th. Obviously, he's not signing these cards anymore.
Right.
And so you don't get, and Willie Mays, this is, by the way, speaking of people, this is Willie Mays' 92nd birthday today. So happy birthday, Willie Mays.
Wow.
And, the greatest living player. He's not doing card shows. He's not doing very many signings, if any, anymore. You're not getting those cards signed. Hank Aaron passed a couple of years ago. So it's now definitely a finite amount of the period cards signed by the people.
Well, Rich, back in the day, I owned a 52 Mantle back in the early 80s, and I never would have thought about getting that card signed at all. That would have been just blasphemy, and it would have scared me to death to even try to have
Walt
that done.
Also made sure not to have these really nice condition cards. If he was going to have a period card, it was going to be a VG card.
Yes.
It was not going to be one of these gem mint, let's say, rose and fine Mantles, was not what he was going to have Mantle signed. It would have been a well-loved example or a loved example. So you weren't getting the gem mint card signed. You were getting the VG, VGXs, good, whatever. You were not getting the mint card signed.
Oh yeah, I have an autograph friend. He gets autographs all the time. He's that's what he does. And we've talked about that. I've known him since the 70s, and it's like what you say. It's just you always get, if you see a beater card of somebody and you're going to get their autograph here soon, that's the card you want to get signed. But that's kind of changed now. People have changed their mind about that.
I actually have
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Adam.
So I was just going to say, actually, no, you can go ahead, Rich. I have a question that's similar to this, but maybe a little bit different of a topic. But go ahead, Rich.
Well, also, as you got more towards the present, a lot of the cards didn't explode in price the way these 50s and 60s cards did. So you may have more rookie cards signed by the players.
True.
Right. I mean, nowadays for sure, like with I think there was that picture of somebody going to like a Jackson Holiday game, and he had like the whole binder like taped with the cards. I think we're definitely seeing a lot of that. And I guess my question is to both of you guys, like the 52 Mantle, has that always been a card that has been as prestigious as it has over the past few years, or like has there been a shift, I guess, because like, at least as long as I've been in, and I have not been in sports cards as long as you guys, but like from 2018, let's just say, like the 52 Mantle was kind of always like a grail card and like the most important card in the hobby. Like, is that a card that's always been like that?
Well, I can attest to this because I was collecting in a lot back then, just like Rich was, but in like the late 70s, and I can remember living at home with my mom and dad, just a kid. I was like 18 years old, and a buddy of mine who was a dealer, he bought a collection and he got a 52 mantle in this collection. He told me and I had been wanting one, and that's about the time that the hype started on this card. And I told him, I said, I want this card. I've got to have this card. So he told me, he goes, it was $1,500. And keep in mind, this is like 1979.
Right. Yeah.
$1,500. And I'm working at a grocery store and I'm making like $2 an hour. So, I'm doing everything I can. I said, I want the card. Hold on to it for me. So I'm working, doing everything I can. I get to about halfway. I got like $750, and he calls me up. He says, I've got a dude that's, got a cash offer, who's got $1,500 right now that can give me the money. He goes, I'm going to give you 2 weeks to get the money. If you can't get the money, I'm going to have to sell the card to somebody else. I said, okay, fine. So I actually went to my boss, who was the owner of our grocery store, and asked for a loan of $750. And he gave it to me, and I worked it off, and I was able to get the card. So yeah, it was prestigious. And that's about the time the rookie card craze started, was like the late 70s, early 80s. So yeah, that was a fun time. I can still vividly remember that.
Yes, I mean, and it's also crazy to compare sort of where the industry, I guess, was. And I mean, I guess you can kind of compare it to just where the world was in general. Because like you said, you're making $2.50 at like a grocery store, and, card being $750, or you needed the 750, you need the 1,500. Like now, like, I mean, nowadays, like the 1,500, you're really kind of, you're looking at like a little bit of a different range of cards now, which I think is pretty crazy. So, Rich, for you, I guess sort of the same question. Like, Logan kind of, I think, laid out a pretty good story about how it's always been sort of a pretty big card within the hobby. So, for you, have you always viewed it that way as well? Like the mantle being the Grail card in the hobby?
Yes, I remember the first time I ever saw a 52 mantle. I may have seen one before in a showcase or something, didn't realize what it was. I'm at a small enough show somewhere in New Jersey. I'm with my dad, and hobby legend, and he truly is a hobby legend, Lou Lipset, had a tower fold, what they call a tower fold those days, and he had it open to the page with a big sign about the 52 mantle, the card, and I think it was $500. And in 1978, $500 for a card was a lot of money. I mean, that was not that far away from what a Wagner was. Wagner was only a few $1,000s. So $500 for a card was huge. And that's the first time I ever saw the card. And by the spring of 1980, it went up to $3,000 and then settled back down to $500 by the fall of 82. And then from that point on, it's basically been on a rocket ship since then.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you think, obviously, I feel like there's exceptions, obviously, when it comes to why things sell a certain way. Do you think that there is any type of like modern card that really could compare to this? Like, do you think like, and maybe it's kind of a twofold. Do you think that there's ever going to be another card that people view similarly? And then also, Logan, I'll start with you. And actually, that's kind of my question. Do you think that there ever will be a card that surpasses the 52 mantle as like the biggest card, or you think it's probably like this is basically the card that everybody is, if you're a high-end collector, because especially with prices nowadays, like this is the card that a lot of high-end collectors are going to want? Like, do you think that there's any card that ever could surpass this card?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit biased here because I used to have one. I think it's the card. I'm going to do air quotes, the card. So I don't think anything is in the foreseeable future is going to surpass a signed Mickey Mantle card. I just don't see it happening. I think that is, the card itself is the Grail. Everybody wants his autograph. I think it's probably only surpassed by Babe Ruth. And so I think this is, as far as vintage goes, this is definitely the signed Grail card, in my opinion.
And then, yeah, Rich, the other part of that question was, do you think that autographed cards, like it's autographed after the fact, do you think that there are any cards that could be in this kind of conversation that will be like as important, like if it's post autograph? Because I mean, we've seen inscriptions and we've seen players kind of going about their autographs a little bit differently on cards, but do you think like on like the actual on card autograph that's produced after the card comes out of a pack, like do you think that they're, because it has been a little bit, I don't know exactly how to describe it. not looked down upon, maybe potentially? Do you think that would ever shift, or do you think there are so many autographs nowadays that it's like it's kind of gonna be the same over the next decade or however long we're kind of looking at timeline?
Well, my mind's drifting. Could you imagine if somebody found a legitimate T206 Wagner with a legitimate Wagner signature on the card? I mean, think about that. The thing was there weren't many autograph collectors. Wagner passed, I believe, in 55, and the world of autograph collecting was very small in those days. So that's probably not going to happen. The thing is with today's cards, and we're just pontificating,
right?
The odds aren't good that anything will ever match it. 52 Topps high numbers are very difficult. Mantle was the face of a generation. Jordan, 86 7 Fleer Jordan signed would probably be the closest equivalent.
Right. I think
that's next generation's holy grail. It won't be a baseball card. It'll be a Gretzky rookie signed or a Jordan rookie signed. The next generation.
Right. I think that's a great point.
Or a Bird Magic dual rookie signed by each of them. And then if you get Dr. J in the middle, all three are still signing. It shows you get all three.
Right.
That would be a really cool card to have a signature on.
Definitely. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think it really comes down to basically who it is. I think, because it's like I said, someone going to going to a minor league game and bringing all those Jackson Holiday cards. There's now like 9 extra autographed Jackson Holiday autograph rookies. Like, you're not going to be able to find Jordan specifically. Like, I don't know if it's true, but I think he was like notorious for not signing stuff because obviously he knows how much his autograph is worth. Same with probably Wayne Gretzky, but so yeah, I think you're right. It's probably like a Jordan or a Gretzky. That would be sort of maybe that next card that would have to be in the conversation for something similar to this. I want to give.
By the way, the prettiest person in the world just walked into my office. So
puppy.
I want to introduce everybody to Charlie.
Hello, Charlie.
Hi, Charlie.
Charlie Cam.
Charlie Cam.
I want to make sure we give us some shout outs here. So we got, if Mantle was wearing a Cubs cap, it would be totally different. The Yankees mystique, I think that's probably true within,
I agree.
Fan bases within sort of the hobby, I think do matter. What is undervalued is high grade autograph vintage rookies. Yeah, that's kind of I think that's true. That's sort of what we were sort of describing there. We got Texas Card Dude said we got a Charlie signing. Also, if you are in the chat, make sure to leave a comment. Let us know where you are watching the show from. Hobby Hotline, it's global. I think we've had people from all over the world commenting and saying where they're from. The next topic that we've got is maybe it's contentious, maybe it's not. We got the Beckett CEO who is reportedly leaving, which it turns out that he had actually been kind of on the outs for a little bit of time before the news kind of broke, like a few weeks before, and I guess nobody really knew about it. But yeah, so we have, I'm going to pull up a tweet from Sports Collectors Daily. Hired in June of last year. Beckett CEO has left the company. So I'll start with you, Rich. I mean, what are kind of your overall thoughts when something like this happens? Like, we have seen a couple of other CEOs like Ezra Levine left Collectible. We've seen some shifting going on in the hobby, but this is probably, from a hobby perspective, this is probably the most high profile big name. I mean, other than, Fanatics, but like from Beckett's perspective, this is probably the biggest change we've seen. So what are kind of your thoughts on this? Like, do you think it's as big a deal as maybe we think it is, or do you think it's maybe a little bit overblown? Like, what are kind of your thoughts overall?
I think it's actually a very positive development for Beckett. And I'll also just start. Ezra Levine announced on LinkedIn that he had left where he was. He says he'll be somewhere new for the National. And I want to give Ezra some credit before we go and talk about Beckett. Ezra, they had the Big Mint Collective. He stayed. He didn't just leave before it. He stayed, making sure, so to speak, his baby in the Mint Collective got done this year. And there's something to be said for completing a job.
Right.
Now,
I also worked with Collectible, and I also want to give a shout out to Ezra. He was extremely nice. You know, I did some content with them. They were, you know, extremely willing to kind of work with the ideas that I had. So, you know, I'll let you continue, but I wanted to give them a shout out.
No, by all means, the more personal things we can add in, the better.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, Ezra.
And the new CEO, his name is Kevin Isaacson. Kevin has worked for Krause. He created the Industry Summit. Kevin has been in this business a long time, and he's yelled at a lot of people, including me. So I want that known. But the thing is, Jim Beckett has a lot of respect for Kevin. If Jim Beckett has a lot of respect for Kevin, then Kevin, with a background as a hobbyist and somebody that Dr. Beckett respects, you know, for being able to run things and for his hobby background, I think that's a very positive step. I think that may readjust the ship at Beckett and get it back to where it was. One of my friends pointed out that, you know, May 4th is Star Wars Day. He got an advertisement from Beckett about May 4th discounts on May 5th. You know, you don't do that. If you're going to send out the Star Wars discounts on May 4th, you send it out on May 4th. You don't send it out on May 5th. You do a Cinco de Mayo, send it out on May 5th.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and the two things with the grading, they were mishandled how they were broken out. I think last year, and I was not at the National, I loved the new logo. There was one thing that I found out later that they did change that they shouldn't have changed, which was the inner sleeve for the card was removed, which is almost a no-no. It really protects the card. But everybody was so focused on logo, they didn't realize what the real problem was. Everybody else changes their logos. Everybody else has changed their look of the slabs. Right. That's not an issue.
Right.
Don't mess with the inner sleeve. It protects the card better.
Right.
And also, this year, the whole thing with the 10, as I've pointed out many times, if I had a card graded 20 years ago, and Beckett's been grading cards for 25 years, with 4 9.5s, and when they brought out the new grading scale, 4 9.5 is a heck of a good card. It's a gem mint card. I can't make that card a 10. All of a sudden, my gem mint card's no longer gem mint. Good luck with that.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And so these are the type of things I think Kevin will just say, what are you thinking of when you do this? You know, instead of thinking about, hey, I was a tech executive at Microsoft. Let's do this. And we can just do this because we're Microsoft. No, let's make these changes based on good logical reasons and make sure our employees are understanding why we want to make the changes. And we've solicited their opinion because they're the ones actually doing the work. And I think that's going to be a much bigger help. So overall, having Kevin Isaacson as the new CEO of Beckett is a really good thing compared to whom they had previously.
I totally agree with that. And, you know, I remember last year when Kunal, I think that's how you pronounce his name, Kunal, yes. He was, you know, became CEO at Beckett. I remember, I think it was Dr. Beckett maybe that was talking with him. And I think Kunal said he'll be at the National and he was going to be walking around, talking to people, trying to get the pulse of the hobby, trying to get a feel for what was going on. And, you know, the fact that he's not a hobbyist, he is not a collector, I think definitely hurt him. And, you know, I never saw him at the National. I was there every single day for hours on end. I never saw that man anywhere. Did you see him anywhere, Rich? I'm sure you might have.
I couldn't go last year. My wife decided
That's right.
For the National, it would be a beautiful time to come down with COVID. And the doctor told me not to go. So I'm kind of glad I didn't go through planes, trains, and automobiles trying to get to Atlantic City.
Right.
Yeah, but I never saw him. And you know, we've talked about this before, and everybody knows this, I think, that's in the hobby. It takes somebody who's in the hobby to run a hobby company. It's just you have to have that collector mentality. I mean, I have friends that don't collect anything. They have no idea about what I do, you know, what I collect, how to collect. They know nothing about it. And that's the same with Kunal. He didn't know anything about it. He knew how to run a company, but he didn't know the collector psyche. He didn't know anything about collecting. And I think that was what really, really hurt him.
Yeah, and I do think that's sort of one of the tough things about working in this industry is that like I feel like the pool of people that that are able to work in the industry is a little bit smaller maybe than other industries because like, and I think I always compare our industry to similar to like sneakers because like if you don't know the ins and outs of products and you don't really know the community, like I'm sure, the changing of the grades may not, and I'm not 100% sure like how in deep Kunal was, or, just in general, how the CEOs and people working within the hobby are within their industry. But like, it felt like it was such an obvious mistake that like, I don't know. It kind of speaks to, and I don't want to be all. I'm sure all of us kind of feel like we're on high horses here, not to no pun intended, considering Kentucky Derby is today. But like when it comes to our industry, we're very protective of it. And I think that's one thing that when we all see the Beckett CEO or Kunal, the previous CEO, make a decision that's like, why would you do that? Like it. I don't know. It feels like we're very protective in many senses when it comes to our industry and how things should be run. But at the same time, it feels like CEOs move throughout other industries fairly simply, I guess. I don't know, maybe not. But like, that's kind of my thoughts on, in general, like where just our industry is maybe a little bit more nuanced than other industries. So it can be tough. So, Rich, I'll ask you this question. Do you think that it is a necessity for someone who is a CEO or someone who is maybe in the C-suite at a card company to really be super in depth in the industry? And I feel like that's maybe you're going to say yes, and that's kind of obvious. But I just kind of want to think. I want you to expand upon that a little bit.
I'm going to say no, but if they collect something, it helps. They don't necessarily have to be in the card. They don't have to be knee deep in the cards. The person who took over as CEO when Dr. Beckett sold the company was a man named Peter Goodmanson, and Jim has talked about him on his podcast. Peter was not a collector. He was not a hobbyist, but he did spend a lot of time talking to Dr. Beckett. They had several meetings. Jim stayed out of the way, but Peter would occasionally go talk to him and seek his advice on collecting type issues. And that, I mean, he could literally walk in the building. It was, a few hundred feet to where Jim's office still was. And understanding that I may not be a collector, but I understand we are dealing with collectors, so let's figure out what works for collectors is fine. You don't have to be a collector, but you have to try to understand why people collect or how people collect, and everybody collects differently. I see our good friend Rex just posted that he's in the chat. He must be having a really good morning. He usually posts very quickly, so he must be really busy this morning.
Yeah, shout out to Rex.
Shout out to Rex and his family. And they deal with all sorts of collectors. They probably have really intense collectors, and they probably have the most casual people walk into their store. So they're dealing with people, on the front lines, face to face. So they know how to deal with it. Rex has worked in the business world too. I would put Rex as a CEO of any company, and he'd probably be fine. He'd probably be really good as a hobby CBO. But he enjoys doing retail with his family. So, there's that too. Sure enough. Yep. Crazy here today. Yep.
Well, Rich, I have a lot of friends at PSA, and every single one of them, I don't know any one of them that doesn't collect something. Most of them collect cards. I remember like even Kevin Lenane, he collects old antique computers, but he's still a collector. And I think he collected cards as well, but still, I think you have to, I still think you have to have some kind of collecting mentality. It doesn't necessarily have to be this particular hobby. It can be some other hobby. You could collect antiques, whatever, barbed wire, whatever. But you still have to know. I think you still have to know a little bit about collecting in general.
Right, but it doesn't have to be cards.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be cards.
It doesn't. My friend who was a co-writer with me at the time at Sports Collectors Daily, Todd Tobias is one of the leading AFL experts in the country, American Football League. He wrote like a doctorate dissertation on Sid Gilman and the San Diego Chargers that got him into the AFL. So as a subset, he really picked up a lot of interesting items about the AFL. I don't know how many he does. He does card collecting. He does autograph collecting of AFL players. I don't know if he did that before he started, but now he's at PSA, and I met him a few years ago, 7, 8 years ago, when PSA was having you do something where you posed, and then they would make a card for you, put it in a little slab, and I said, "Can you just send this back there?" I had one of my Topps cards. I said, "I just want it slabbed," and they went back. This is a special request. Todd happened to be back there. He says, "Oh, I know him. You're doing that." And then he waited, and then he came out, and I actually got to meet him, which was kind of cool. I don't know if he was a collector growing up, but he's sure a collector now.
Oh, he's got a great AFL collection. Todd Tobias?
Yes.
Yes.
Great AFL collection.
Yes, he really
he's
does.
built it in recent years. So whether he grew up as a collector, now he is. So sometimes you can get the collecting after you start working in the field too.
Well, speaking of collecting, you got to get I don't think, you get the collecting gene from somewhere, and I got it from my grandmother. She was an old antique collector, and, she taught me some things, and, I started collecting cards, and that's where I've been ever since. But do you guys have a mentor or somebody that, is in your gene pool maybe that got you started collecting? Just curious.
I've told the story. I had to get this from my father. My father was a vest pocket stamp and coin dealer in the 40s and 50s until he got married. And so he was a collector. And I guarantee you that's where I got it from. Period, end of sentence.
What about you, Adam?
Not really. I mean, when I got back into it, like I did collect when I was younger, but a lot of it wasn't like really, it was a lot of like just going with my parents, and they would buy the packs or the boxes or whatever I was end up buying. Like the one memory I always have growing up as a kid was like there was a flea market like on the Cape, and if anybody has ever lived on the Cape, they may remember it was called Dick and Ellie's. It was like a open air market that they turned into like a retail space, unfortunately, but it was like an open air flea market where there was a one card dealer that was there that sold the like huge 800 count long boxes that they would take all the rookie cards and they'd put all the base cards in there. So, I would always just flip through those. And when I mean, luckily for the most part, it may just be that, my family maybe hoards a little bit, some stuff. But like when I went back a couple of years ago, all my cards were still there, which was pretty surprising. But then I, like I said, I went through the box and it was all just like the random commons and base cards of 92 Fleer, random sets. So it was fun going through and pretty nostalgic, but not really. I mean, and for the most part, getting back into it, it was a lot of content people in general. Honestly, how I was learning sort of the hobby was going through content and then learning stuff and then kind of creating my own content. As I was learning stuff when I was getting back in, that was sort of that was my journey back into it. So when it comes to a mentor, not really necessarily, but I mean, I think, kind of in a weird way, everybody has been my mentor in a way, everybody that I've kind of created content and listening to stories and all that kind of stuff. And learning, I always say this, there's always something new to learn in this industry. Even me or even anybody. I think that if you're not learning still in this industry, then, maybe, I don't know. I think that you should be still trying to learn either way. But yeah, I mean, that's from my perspective, that's been kind of, my journey back in. Not so, like I said, not necessarily a single person, but kind of the hobby in general, I guess.
That's cool. I know Rich and I, Rich, you've been in the hobby for over 50 years, right?
No, I mean, I collect, my first packs I bought were 68, but I really got into the organized hobby about 77.
Okay. But I mean, in a roundabout way, it's been more than 50 years.
Yeah. There was a store near me. I'd go there a few times a year. So, I mean, in a sense, I was in the hobby by about 74, 75.
So, yeah, you're getting close then.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, I think that sort of, there's a lot changing within the hobby, you know, CEOs moving around, all that kind of stuff. I think that's a good actually transition into something that kind of came up this past week. So Fanatics has finally started to launch, I guess, their Fanatics Live. I think it's going to be their card breaking service. I mean, they have had, I'm going to pull up a tweet again with kind of some of the info in case anybody is wondering. So Fanatics Live, let me pull up this here. So they launched the, you know, the application basically to sign up if you're looking to get into the beta. And they also have some of their roles there, which they're, I mean, obviously, as we've seen over the past few weeks and months, they've been hiring pretty aggressively, and then apply to sell with us. So there hasn't been necessarily a launch of the platform itself, but it looks like they're trying to get some sort of backlog. I'll start with you, Logan. Like, is, you know, Fanatics Live, does that get your does that get your juices going? Like, is this something that you're interested in? I mean, I know for some people it's kind of just another thing, but you know, are you excited for this? Like, kind of what are your thoughts on them sort of kind of moving more towards launch?
Well, you know, I'm going to go back to being old school. You know, I'm an old school guy. You know, I've bought into a few NASCAR breaks because everybody on here knows that I collect NASCAR, but I've bought into a few NASCAR breaks, you know, on various different platforms over the years, but not very many. It's not my thing. So am I excited about this? No, not really. If they get some cool F1 stuff, maybe I might do something. I don't know. But does it get my juices flowing? No, it doesn't do anything for me. But I do realize that this is one of the directions the hobby is heading. I know it's a big thing. I know that there's a lot of breaking going on, but, you know, it's got a breaking is, you know, thanks to certain people, it's gotten a bad rap. And there's, you know, my experiences have been good with breaking. You know, I've gotten the cards that I was supposed to get. I mean, you know, who really wants to keep some NASCAR cards? I mean, honestly, but you know, you get these high end cards. I can see where there could be, you know, some cheating or some bad things going on. You know, people trying to take cards or not deliver what they say they're going to deliver. So honestly, it just doesn't get my juices flowing. You know, good for Fanatics. You know, apparently, you know, I thought the Fanatics Live was probably going to be just like all Fanatics, but it looks like they are going to have different breakers other than themselves. So, you know, they're going to have to really, you know, go and check out all these people that they're going to sign up and make sure that they're going to be honest and legit. Because if they get somebody that doesn't deliver or takes a card or does something wrong, that's really going to make them look bad, and that's going to hurt their platform tremendously.
Right. I agree. And Rich, I kind of same question for you. Like, does this excite you at all? Like, what are your kind of overall thoughts as we're moving towards the launch of Fanatics Live?
Like Logan, I'm not super excited, but I know this is a Fanatics goal. They want to, in a sense, you know, be able to be part of the entire process. And if this helps them be part of the process and does things legitimately for the buyer and the seller, I'm all in favor of it. You know, we can have a discussion about hobby ethics now. For example, Whatnot now has people that I believe they are paying to watch videos to make sure nothing shady is going on. You know, if Fanatics does something very similar, hey, we're going to have people to watch the videos and make sure you get what you're supposed to get, and people aren't opening their, you know, faking their hits and putting the best cards off camera and do all that, then I'm all in favor of them doing things. Because then if you screw up and you're direct with Fanatics and then they catch you screwing up royally, you will lose your Fanatics account, I would bet. And if you lose your Fanatics account, you've promptly now lost your revenue generator. So I'm trying to look at that as a real positive, that if you do it right or reasonably right, I mean, we're still human beings. We're still going to make mistakes. But if you do this right, it's a positive for the industry. I also have to stress, I work for a company that has a relationship with Fanatics. ComC has handled the MVP promotion cards. We were inundated with cards. If to be honest, if your cards got processed a little bit later than they should have been, one of the reasons was, and and I know there's an official customer service email, that really helped get us a ton of cards in, which is great. And so we want to continue having a relationship with Fanatics. And it's a good thing. And Fanatics wants us to do the right thing. And if they want us to do the right thing, we as a hobby want Fanatics to do the right thing. And as I point out, if they make the breaks clean, so to speak, then that's a good thing. That's ethical. You know, our friends at Sports Card Radio always try to talk about bad breakers. And one situation with a bad break I want to discuss, which when I went to the very first million card rip, which was just before the pandemic began, at AT&T Stadium in Arlington, there really wasn't a good way for a lot of these breakers to keep their common cards that you got if you were doing team breaks. There wasn't a post office thing set up, and there wasn't a ton of room in the room. And so it was really hard to do that properly. So that one I'm almost going to say is a bit of a pass. Having been in the room and seeing how the breakers had to do things, you almost need to double the space for every breaker to do that right. So that one to me was a little bit of a pass just based on the logistics of it. But other than a situation like that where it was a great idea with just not quite as much thought done as it could have been, you want the breaks done right. And if this makes the breaks done right, then I'm 100% behind this.
Right. And I think, in my opinion, I think that's where it comes down to. I'm hoping that whatever the application process is for Fanatics, I hope that it's pretty thorough, in my opinion. Like, I don't want to say I think that we need some sort of regulators or people to come in and, you know, you have to have a license to break. But it's like, I just feel like there is, and I think you mentioned Sports Card Radio. I think they've talked about this as well. You know, if you're a breaker, you really, and there have been a couple breakers over the past few months that have kind of done this, but they don't really have much to lose when it comes to the cards that maybe they're stealing, in my opinion. Like a lot of the breakers, like I know, you know, we don't want to paint some things in bad lights, but it's like, I just think that if breakers are doing things a certain way and it's wrong, I think that there needs to be more accountability, because breaking has become such an integral part, and it's new-ish. You know, it's not necessarily something that was invented recently, but it's new, or it's, you know, card breaking on the internet is fairly new. So it's like I think we're still in the phase where we're figuring it out. But I do think that there needs to be more checks and balances when it comes to like how people are actually running their business, because that's what it is. They're running a business, and there's no, there's sometimes it feels like there's no backstop on how people are running their business. Like they can just run their business however they want. And even if they're doing something that's like illegal, in this case, sometimes stealing cards, it feels like they can just do it and get away with it because there aren't necessarily any rules or regulations. Like, sure, they might get kicked off or whatnot, but then they can just move to TikTok, or they can just move to some other platform, and maybe they won't make as much, but it feels like breaking as an industry should be more, like I said, I don't like using the word necessarily, but like regulated, similar to the gambling industry, because that's, in my opinion, that's sort of what it is. And I get, like you were saying, I think that kind of gets into our conversation of hobby ethics in general. Like, we're going to talk about actually, so our friends over at Bench Clear Media, Chasing Cardboard, who in my opinion have one of the best hobby shows. Like it's extremely, it's so well done in my opinion. And it's so thorough, and the production is off the charts. I mean, that's just not me saying that because we're on their network, but like, I think that they have one of the best shows. And whenever I'm talking about the Golden Show, I always try and mention this show because I think they're creators within the hobby that are creating something that 10 years down the road, this is going to be a show that I think could, it could be bought out by a network, and it could be like almost a time capsule. And they actually so Chasing Cardboard recently came out with a video. Rich, I know you have watched the video and you were explaining it to me earlier, and I think your explanation was probably better than how I could have explained it, but it was with this video right here. So, I mean, explain sort of what happened in the video, and kind of, your thoughts on it, I guess.
Okay. And I'll also give you the spoiler alert. They bought this collection, and the key card in the collection was It's the second time this has come up at the show, a 52 mantle.
Actually, wait, don't spoil it, but sort of maybe try and allude to what happens
I'll
at the
allude
end,
to what happens, okay.
just in case there are people that haven't watched the video yet that want to go
Fair-
watch it.
fair- fair enough.
But either way, just allude to it. But sorry,
Fair
continue.
enough. They get a 52 mantle as part of this deal. They send it to a grading company. It comes back authentic altered. They want to get a number grade instead of an authentic altered grade. So they go through the process of explaining why they're cracking the card and then how they're cracking the card. And the ethics question comes up is, at least with this mantle, you know the backstory and the history. And Chasing Cardboard has their own eBay ID. You buy it from them on eBay, you can do your due diligence and you can see the story. And the ethics question is, should you disclose when you sell the card, let's say if it came back a 1 or a 2, that, our first attempt with authentic altered, or just take the grade? And there are counterbalancing arguments each way. I have read so many things on the PSA message boards about, I got a 5 and I think this card is an 8, and I resubmitted the card 3 different times. I got a 4, a 5, a 7, and an 8. And when they get the 8, they stop. So at what point does, and I'm sure that's happened with DECA too, so I'm not trying to slag on PSA. I'm sure that will happen with SGC and CSG. So this is not designed to take a shot at PSA. This is something I've seen on the PSA message boards. It's common to want to get a better grade. Your eyes always tell you your grade's better than what the graders tell you it is. The ethic question is, should you disclose that the card originally came back authentic altered?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if and when it gets a number grade.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kick it to you, Logan. Like, what do you think? Like, what do you think about Rich's question?
Well, I mean, I agree. I mean, I've had cards that I've gotten, and I'm convinced that there are 10. I've gotten 9s, and I've cracked them, and I have sent them in and gotten 10s back. Now, whether or not you want to try to get a card that's been already labeled as altered with a number grade, I don't know that I agree with that, because it's altered for a reason. Either it's been trimmed or something. Usually that's what's happened. It's been trimmed. So if it's altered already and it's already been identified as altered, I mean, they just don't go and go, they don't look at the card and go, it's been altered. They actually measure it. They do things to it. They check it. So they're not going to just say altered just for the sake of saying altered. There's a reason for that. So if you're going to try to take a card and send it back and get a number grade, I just don't agree with that. I think I just don't agree with it. I think it can be, unless you disclose that. If you do send an altered card back, you get a grade on it, I think you should disclose that information, that, hey, this card used to be altered, now it's got a number grade, and let people know. Now, if you do that, I think it's a little bit better, but still, I just still don't agree with it.
Yeah, I mean, for grading, the conversation, I feel like with grading, it never ends. There's so many different ways to go about it. I maybe have a little bit more of an extreme take than maybe others. I actually think that companies should be, within the slab, they should be adding some sort of like either transparent tape, or they should be adding some sort of thing that would basically make you not be able to reslab a card, which then, in my opinion, they need to figure out a way to take this subjectivity out of grading, that's a whole nother. I think these two things are kind of a whole crazy sort of, maybe a little bit, I don't know if they're hot takes, but I just think that the regrading affects prices. It affects the pop reports, obviously, because if you're regrading, then who knows how many times a single card has been graded. Who knows how many times like the Luka PSA, the Luka 2018 Prism card has been regraded. Like, if you say, or they need to, I don't know. Like I said, there has to be a way to fix and change maybe the regrading of slabs, or they need to, I don't know. It needs to be noted. I don't know. It's kind of, like I said, it's confusing, and it's not really something that maybe has a simple solution to it. But I don't love being able to reslab in general. And from an ethics perspective, and it's maybe my opinion that hurts the back end data, because if you're reslabbing a card 10 times, those population card, the population of that specific card doesn't then go down because you open the card. Like maybe even putting, and then this would maybe make grading more expensive, put like a microchip in the slab, so that way if it gets cracked, that number or that certification number then gets deleted or something along those lines. I mean, I think as we kind of get more in technology starts to evolve with grading, that's maybe where we'll see it. And I mean, so Logan, I'll kick it back to you actually. So, you know, the concept of ethics within the hobby, you know, is there anything, do you see anything that you would maybe want to change within the hobby when it comes to, I guess, ethics in general? Because like I said, it's sort of an open-ended question, but you know, we're talking about grading, but is there anything else from your opinion like that you see that you would maybe change? I think.
Well, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I will say that it's not hard to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Doing the right, you know, I try to live by that. I don't always do the right thing. I don't always make the best decisions, but I'm always trying to do the right thing. And if you're in the hobby, you know, I think you need to try to be honest. You need to be, you know, disclose information. I think you need to just be honest in the hobby. And if you do those things, you're going to have a good hobby reputation, and you're going to have a good hobby experience. The hobby is all about fun to me. You know, I know a lot of people, this is an investment, and that's fine. That's your thing, and that's great. But that's not what I'm in it for. I've always been collecting as a collector. You know, and I told you, you know, I busted out a few cards, and you're talking about the population report. You know, I have actually taken my old flips and handed them to Joe Orlando or Steve Sloan or whoever at the National, and hand them to them and say, here you go. And they go, thank you. That way we can get everything squared away in the population report. So, I mean, you know, I've like I said, I have cracked a few slabs. I mean, it's not like it's any big deal,
Right.
as far as, you know, a big card or anything like that. But as far as hobby ethics and what I would like to see happen, I mean, like I said, I just want people to do the right thing. If you know, like, you know, certain breakers that want to keep a card, you know, you can't do that. Just do the right thing and give the card out to the person it belongs to. I mean, if you do those things, people are going to appreciate you more. I mean, I know a lot of it is just for hype and everything, you know, and they got a lot more publicity for doing that than they would have done otherwise. But I keep going back to just do the right things. I mean, it is not hard. Just be honest with people. I've always tried to be honest in the hobby. I like to think my reputation is a decent reputation. I have a lot of fun in the hobby and have a lot of friends. And I think I have that because I've done the right things.
Yeah, and I think the old saying, or maybe it's not an old saying, is doing the right thing is always the right thing. Like, or at least trying to. Like, I think, you know, like you said, I think a lot of people, some people are in this for business, some people are in this for investment, some people are in it to have fun. Like, there's so many different ways to do the hobby. There's not necessarily a wrong way to do it. I mean, unless you're doing something illegal or unethical, but like, I think there are so many different ways to do it. And I mean, I'll ask you, Rich, kind of a similar question. I know that was sort of the topic that we talked about with the regrading, but is there anything from your opinion that you would change within, you know, if it's a hobby ethics or something that you see that maybe you want to point out as something that, I don't know, maybe people aren't doing correctly?
I'm going to go in a few different things. There's a saying, doing the right thing when no one is looking really is a testament to your character.
Yes.
Before we go into that, I listened to a POTUS, which is channel 124 on my Sirius XM. And I listened during the week to their news programs. And I almost drove off the road yesterday as I'm listening. And the young lady who's a producer on the show that's 9 to noon Eastern, the Smirkana show, her name is TC. She was talking about on Thursday night, she had watched the Kenny Golden show. And she's not a collector. And she went into a dissertation about how interesting the show was. I mean, and I realized that's really gone mainstream. If they're all talking about that show on, and they're not collectors, and and I said that was really cool to hear. I almost drove off the road at that point. The last time I almost drove off the road is when a late friend of mine, and I'm driving him back, and he used to get me tickets to the games at the ballpark, and he mentioned about some of the ladies who became Playboy Playmates that he knew, And I almost drove off the road at that point too. But that's a different subject for a different day.
Yeah, that's a different show. That's a different show.
That's a very different show. Yes. The lifestyles of the rich and famous, or famous playmates who came out of Dallas. And there actually have been quite a few. There were actually quite a few back in the day. But this topic this came up in a roundabout way. And I didn't go today because I had this. But we do, I'm part of a Sabbath study group on Saturday morning. And last week we talked about, there's a big portion of what we call the Torah, what Christians call the Old Testament, the first 5 books, the books of Moses, about how to conduct business. And you conduct business honorably. Now, one of the things about the card business is there are a lot of gray areas.
Mm-hmm.
And the gray areas, and I'm going to give you an easy gray area, to me is a no-brainer. Logan gets a card of a person he wants in an SGC holder. There aren't any PSA holders in the condition he wants, but he sees an SGC card. He buys that card to flip the holder from SGC to PSA. That to me is totally legit. He is buying a card that's already been graded high. He's not trying to shop the grade. He just wants it. He wants to keep his collection all PSA. I'm fine with that. But if you're, looking to shop the grade, if he's a multi-grading company person and says, I know PSA grades these too high or too low, and so PSA grades 40 play balls higher than they should. Supposedly they did 25, 30 years ago. This is what I heard from dealers at the time. Well, if they were grading cards too high and SGC was grading them tougher, you buy the SGC 5 to hope you get a PSA 6 or 7. Now that's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a little bit of a gray area too. Is that trying to put one over? Or is that just using your market knowledge? There's a lot of gray area in ethics.
Mm-hmm.
I've told the story at the 2021 National. I'm looking through a good friend of mine, Joe Davis, Get Sports Cards in Georgia. He has a $300 card in his dollar bin. And I'm debating for 20 minutes about, do I tell him and not tell him? And the Goodrich won, and I told him. And he got the card to PSA. It got whatever grade. We ended up splitting like $325. And he even covered the grading costs. And then he sent me the money to help. My wife had a medical expense that had come up after her kidney. And so she helped. It went right to her for that. It was wonderful. And, so that was an example of how doing the right thing paid off and made him happy, taught him something. And it still put money in my pocket. And I still paid the dollar. And I'm going to give a different shout out. Kyle Robertson has a nice store literally almost across the street from my office, almost across the street from the Dallas Card Show. Well, I was going through his dollar bin and they'd given me a good price. Well, lo and behold, I pulled this one card and I just knew instinctively it was better. And I didn't think anything that was super better. It was one of the top SSPs from this year. Mm-hmm. Well, we still talk about it because it was a $50 card. So What we did is we kind of redid the deal. I had pulled like 40 cards. So instead of the 50 cents per card they were giving me, because I do a lot of helping promotion for the show, they basically charged me $1 each on the 40 cards and threw in the SSP for free, saying that's how we're going to do it. I go, fine. It's not a big deal. We were all on board with that because they told me what the card was and how we were going to do it. To me, that was an acceptable way of changing the deal. I wasn't trying to put one. I just knew it was a better card. I didn't know how much better until they did the comps and looked it up for me. And then looked it up at Beckett at $60 in Beckett. Right. I didn't know how good it was. I just knew it was better.
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly, those two stories in general, I think are kind of great ways to wrap up the show. I think we're kind of coming up on that hour mark. And I mean, my final thoughts, I'll kind of bring it around the horn, but my final thoughts just on this topic and, a hobby in general is just always, if you're trying to do the right thing, there is, whether you like it or not, there is a lot of money to be made in this industry. So if you have the opportunity to, donate something or, share the profits on something, like in your scenario, Rich, where you had a $300 card on your hands, but it was in a dollar bin. Like, that's something where at one point it could have been a dollar card. That's why obviously it was in that bin. So it's always good to, like I said before, doing the right thing, I think, is always the right thing to do. And if you are at least trying to do the right thing, then you're going to put yourself in a scenario where other people will see that and, they will have a good opinion about you, because that's just sort of, at least that's how the world should work. And I think as we move more and more into an age where we're all so connected over the internet and everybody kind of has these connections, I think that ends up happening. So, like I said, I think we're going to wrap the show up a little bit here. So, Logan, do you have any final thoughts for the show today?
Again, just going back to what we were talking about, do the right thing, try not to be greedy. Going back to what you said, if there was one thing I could change, is maybe change some of this hobby greed, because there is unfortunately a lot of hobby greed out there. So just do the right things, have fun with the hobby. That's what I live by. I do it. I try to do it every day. I enjoy the hobby. I protect the hobby, like you guys were talking about earlier, and just want to have fun.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And then Rich, how about you? Do you have any final thoughts for today?
Well, yeah, I was talking about the Kyle Robertson Dallas Card Show Sports Collectors Hub. They're having a trade day today. So instead of going to sit for 3 hours at a law school graduation, I will in a couple hours be sitting and chatting with people at a trade day for a few hours just to have fun. And they were redoing their walls and putting more stuff up and putting more stuff in the showcase to get ready for it. So, and then in 2 weeks, there's a Dallas Card Show. And then I have my small show at my synagogue 3 weeks after that. So it's fun, and as I said, we were talking about the trimming. Also, I did not mention there was the Evan Mathis trimming video.
Ugh.
Yeah, I know, where he actually talked and showed how he did it.
Yeah, what
and that's not ethical. That's a different level.
That's completely unethical.
Yeah, I believe that they did talk about that on either Tuesday's show. But yeah, I mean, I think a ridiculous video that never should have came out. But yeah, sorry, Rich, continue if you had anything else you wanted to say.
No, so I mean, as I said, there's a lot. If it's a gray area, it's a gray area, and there are times where you don't know what you're buying. I've bought stuff where I said this looks like a good deal to me. And I don't know at the time how good it is until I get home and figure it out. Because unlike some people, I don't comp everything on a phone. If I'm going, like Jim Becker would say, if I'm going through a dollar box, I'm not comping stuff. I'm going from memory. If it's a case where I don't know the card or I don't know the dealer and I see it, and I figure it's probably good, and I don't know, and it's a random dealer, I don't know who it is, what am I going to do? So there's always a gray area too. We're in this business. So many of us want to win. Winning is okay, but how you win is the key.
Yes.
Right. Definitely. Yep. And I think that's a great way to sort of wrap up the show. I want to say shout out to everybody in the comments. Thank you all for, letting us know where you're from and all your comments from today. Make sure to come back here on the Bench Clear Media Network YouTube channel next Saturday, same time for the next Hobby Hotline. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you in the next episode.
I'll record it.